Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Farrara and I'm honoured to be reviewing your images this month for the British Institute of Professional Photographers. I know how nerve-wracking it can be to submit your images for critique. So I've been there, I know how it feels, but the best feedback you can get is the negative feedback. That's where you really can grow. So I will be commenting on the things about the pictures I think is working, and I will also be commenting on things that I think can be worked on to improve the picture, whether it be for print competition or for your clients. I really hope you find it interesting and educational, and if you have any questions or comments, just reach out through Facebook or in the BIPP group, and I would love to answer them. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we can look at the first picture. And I would love to commend the photographer on the use of bold color. It really works, especially for a child photograph. I also like the way that the blue is almost a perfect complementary color to the yellow. I would suggest, as it's such a bright yellow, using an equally bright blue verging on violet in order to be right on the opposite of the color wheel. You'll find that it really, really helps the boy stand out, and complementary colors just work in our brains. When we see complementary colors together, the picture just looks right to us. We don't understand why, but that's how it works. So if you're going to be using color, then make sure you're using color with intent and with purpose. Now, to improve the image, I would love to see the boy with as much energy and vitality as the color of the background. So I would suggest removing the sunglasses, because when you put sunglasses, a barrier over the eyes, you're removing the biggest point of connection between the subject and the camera lens. The eyes are the window to the soul, they say. So covering them, there has to be a really good reason for that. Always be careful if you're going to close the eyes or put sunglasses on or have a hat brim covering the eyes. It really needs to be done carefully and with great intention. So I would suggest removing the sunglasses, removing the chair so that we don't muddy up a clean color palette, and have the boy acting, moving, jumping, so that his expression and connection with the camera matches the bright color palette. Moving on to photograph number 2, again, great use of color. Here, there's a synchronization between the outfit on the puppy and the background, with the chair being such an important compositional element. It's slightly off center. Now, if you're going to be center, be center. If you're going to be on the rule of thirds, be on the rule of thirds. It doesn't quite work if it falls in between. In this case, because we have the shape of the white chair and the puppy posed so beautifully, looking direct at the camera in the middle, I would go for a central composition. So reframe a little bit, make sure that the pink background goes above the chair. Here we've got the top of the chair clipped off a little bit so that the pink provides a frame to the image. Then we have the white chair framing the puppy, and then the puppy right in the middle. Consider a square crop as well. Image number 3, I think, has great commercial appeal. This really looks like the sort of image that you might see on a website as a stock image selling food, or for some sort of advertising or commercial use. So well done for that. I really like the composition with all of the macaroons on one side and the crumbs trailing and going up in a diagonal up to the top left. The pink macaroons make a nice triangle, sort of leading our eyes around and then up into the upper left-hand corner as we follow the crumb trail. I would suggest, though, if you're going to be producing an image like this that looks like it could be used for advertising or a commercial use, remember that these type of photographs tend to be very, very carefully retouched and refined. So any crumb that shouldn't be there or any crack in the biscuit that isn't deliberately there needs to be retouched out. And I would also suggest a little bit more control with the lighting. This looks like some daylight. It looks a little bit flat. So try using some continuous lighting, try experimenting with flash, try a little bit more control if you have a slash of light that could be coming across to carve out some shape and three-dimensionality of the objects that you're photographing, can really start to make it sing and look really professional. I would shoot something like this with a continuous light quite hard to create some really nice highlights and shadows on the item that we're photographing, but very well done. Image number 4, she has a beautiful serene expression, and the part that I love most about this picture is the head and the shoulders. There are a few things that immediately call my attention, and that's the difference in skin tone between her face and her hands and her body. Her face is very desaturated, almost grey looking, and that would be fine if that was throughout the body, because our brain would balance it out. It wouldn't look unusual to us if it was overall desaturated. However, the fingers in particular are really, there's a lot of red and magenta in there. So we need to balance out those skin tones. Another thing is the arm coming direct towards the camera. I do understand that you're trying to show off the engagement ring, and that's wonderful and very appropriate for the picture. However, a straight arm coming towards the camera tends to be not particularly harmonious to the eye and not very flattering to the arm. Always try to keep the limbs going across the frame rather than towards the camera to avoid either some distortion going on or foreshortening, depending on the type of lens you're using, the lens length. If you're using a longer lens, it's going to be compressed. If you're using a wide angle lens, the limb that's coming towards the camera is going to look disproportionately large. Try bending the elbow, have her arm placed with her fingers going towards her knee so that the elbow is continuing this nice triangle shape and this very feminine S curve that we're getting on the picture as a whole. Also, please bear in mind the background. Now, if she had her hair all messy and she was laughing and smiling and was hugging a pillow, then the bed can be unmade. However, this is a very posed image, so therefore the bed needs to be pristine. Behind, the pillows just need to be smoothed out and made. I would also have perhaps reframed it in a way that the dark line of the bed head wasn't cutting through the back of her. Everything is white except her hair and her features, which is great. That's the point of interest that we're being drawn in to look at. That's the most contrasty part. But then we've got the bed head that's fighting, pulling our eyes away from the image. Now, there are ways around this. You can angle yourself in a different way. You can light the subject so that we don't see the background at all and that we're just seeing the highlights and the shadows on the bride. But overall, a beautiful, beautiful feel to this bridal boudoir shot. Image number 5, very saleable. I'm sure the bride loves this picture. You've captured the dress, you've captured the bride looking beautiful, you've captured the venue, both inside and outside, and that's not easy to do. So well done. Consider perhaps choosing a moment where there isn't harsh sunlight coming onto the bride's face. This can work sometimes, and in this case, she does have good skin, so it's not too jarring. But usually we want to have a nice soft light falling onto the bride, and so therefore she could have been placed in a room where the light wasn't coming right onto her. Although I do understand that you wanted her at the window. I'm pleased to see that the verticals are looking quite vertical. I'm glad that you've got down a little bit. You're not shooting from too high up and shooting down on her too much. I think that really works. Consider asking her to point her knees towards that open window, camera right, and have her ankles coming the opposite direction, so camera left. So again, you've then got her body sort of creating this zigzag across rather than having the knees coming straight towards us. Image number 6, this is really impactful. This is a very popular style at the moment, and overall, it's a very, very pleasing image. I do think that the post-production has been overdone a little bit. That clarity, that detail has been pulled out so much that I fear that we've lost a little bit of, let's put it this way, if we're looking at the retouching at the post-production, then it means that we're missing something. It means that it's been overdone because we're not looking at the subject, we're looking at what's been done to the picture. So I would suggest easing back a little bit on that clarity or the detail enhancement that you've used there, and using more lighting control in camera in order to get the shot that you want. I would like to see the dog positioned a little bit more to the camera right of the cushion. And I would also desaturate the chair a little bit, because it's the color of the chair is making my eyes confused. I should be looking at the dog, and instead I'm drawn to the brightness of the chair, the highlights on the leather. And I appreciate that you're really trying to pull out that leather texture, which is great. But be careful that it's not taking the eye away from where you want the eye to be. You as the photographer control where the eye of the viewer falls with light and with contrast. Image number 7, this is really impactful, and I especially appreciate the symmetry of the image, apart from the hat tilted over one eye, which works really well. I would love to see some refinement on this in order to really bring it up, because there are a few things that are pulling it down. The vignette is a little bit harsh. The lighting, when I say refinement, this is what I mean. The lighting needs refining. The light on the ear is so bright that the highlights are almost blown out. They're so bright that instead of looking at his very magnetic gaze, my eye is taken to the ear, particularly the one camera left. And I'm going to zoom in to show you a few things. The rim light should really be an accent that is lower in intensity than the main key light, unless you're deliberately going for a very dark look and only just an outline. But if it's going to be a rim light like this, it really should be so delicate that it's just kissing the skin and it's not blasting that light onto the skin and making all of those highlights blow out. Another thing is the retouching. I would love to see refined, because I'm saying this because I truly believe this has a lot of potential. Also, I'm not sure if this is I would have to look at this in Photoshop to see for sure, but I can see some color artifacting going on here, which would come out in print. Don't know if you can see that. There's the stripes, there's a green stripe, then there's a magenta stripe, and this would come out in print, or could come out in print. I'm looking at this on a calibrated monitor, and these types of issues are technical issues which would cost you points in competition. So do take a look at that. However, I'm not looking at this in Photoshop. I'm looking at this in a PDF file. So I reserve my judgment on that. There are these little flecks that, and I've seen that some cloning has been done on the hat. More needs to be done. Every little single fleck needs to be cleaned up, because that will be noticeable in print. And when it comes to retouching, I suspect you've used frequency separation, and I fear that the radius is too low. You've used too low a radius. If you did use frequency separation rather than a commercial skin filter, then you'll know what I'm talking about. Use a higher radius to get a much more natural look, especially for men. You really don't want to have over smoothing. And you can easily get around that by using a higher radius when you do the frequency split, and very, very carefully cloning the texture after you've smoothed some of the underlying layers, because we've got some uneven skin tone, and yet there is clearly smoothing has gone on. It's also been over sharpened, so watch out for that. If you can refine this, this has huge potential. So really well done. This is a really lovely family shot, and I absolutely adore the energy that's going on here. every single person in the picture is connecting, is laughing, has a joyous expression or a wicked expression in the case of the little boy there on the left. A few things to improve it. Try to pick a time of day when little patches of sunlight aren't coming into the image and burning, for example, on the mum's leg and on the little boy's hair. There are these bright hot spots of sunlight. You could reframe and crop out the top left-hand corner. We can see this green foliage that's really pulling the eye away. If you could crop that down so that all I can see, if I can just see the brick wall and those bars, I would also consider turning it to black and white to stop any distraction of the color and really helping us focus on the emotion and the fun of the image on their faces. And that's when I tend to find black and white really works, is when there's a lot of emotional impact going on. Image number 9. A beautiful moment that really speaks to my heart as a mother, and it really makes me smile. There's a beautiful, serene feel to the picture, which I really appreciate. And I can see that you've tried to add an artistic touch with the sepia tone, which I think works very well. Some tips for improvement. Now, she's in front of a window and I can see the curtains behind. I would consider pulling those curtains closed a little bit more to have more control of the light coming in and hitting the mother and child. It's amazing how much you can control the light in a room just by closing the windows, closing the curtains and allowing less light to come in, but more directional. And then you can position the mother exactly where you want her. And I would position her a little bit further back than where the curtain is. So if you pull the curtain forward, you position her slightly back so that the light comes across and just kisses her face and the baby's head. And that way you're just getting this controlled light, almost like a studio. You can literally create a studio just with a room and using the curtains to control it. I would also love to see the mother looking down and engaging with the child. And if we could just turn so that we could see the baby's face a little bit more as well. Beautiful, well done. Hugely impactful image. This is number 10 of the bodybuild, the weightlifter. Great expression, great impact, very wise to use black and white. I would use some post-production as well to darken down and reduce some of the distractions in this busy gym, which I understand are there. But you can, as an artist, use retouching. This isn't photojournalism, so you can retouch out, for example, the little sign in the back here, this little alarm at the top. There are a few things that you can do to tidy up the image and just ensure that our focus is on the bodybuilder. I do love the slashes of light coming in through the window in the background. I think that works. Careful, there's a little hot spot on his shoulder. Now, a client probably wouldn't mind that. However, judges in competition or qualifications would. And I really like the use of foreground elements to frame the image. I'm not quite sure what it is that we're seeing there on the left, but the fact that it's bowing inwards rather than curving the other way makes it more like an obstruction and less like a deliberate frame. So if you are going to use foreground elements, choose them wisely. I would also love to see the barbells. We're not seeing all of the weights on the barbells, and considering how many he's lifting, I think that would have been really interesting to see. This is a really interesting image. Now, this just draws me in, and I'm thinking, what's the story? Because there must be one. Unfortunately, it's not clear to me. So I would love to have a little bit more narrative that helps me as the viewer understand what's going on here. And I love the fact, okay, I think I'm seeing it. It's a top that is perhaps not suitable for summer. It's been left out on a chair and there's been an unexpected snowfall. Perhaps that's it. It's very nice use of color, very nice use of shape with the arms coming down and the hood creating that V. However, I would like a little bit more narrative going on. I really love the composition of this lovely picture of some chickens in the snow. Clearly, this is a lovely composition of these chickens having some fun in the snow. I can see from the other images as well that this has been a month where there was some unexpected snowfall. So it's a lovely juxtaposition of the chickens with the snow. I also love the composition, the diagonal line that they're walking in. There is some color balance issue though. Snow is white and there's a really blue cast to the snow. So in post-production, just be careful that the snow looks white or off-white as it would in real life, and it's going to look a lot more realistic. There's also a little bit, I think, the light on hitting the snow behind the chickens as well is really bright. If we could somehow control that light a little bit, I think we'd have a much stronger image, but well done. This is a great capture of a dog running directly towards the owner, and the gaze is piercing right into the lens. So that's really well done. I also love the color palette. We've got the greens and the browns, and the brown is really picking up on the eyes, the ears, and the collar of the dog. That is working really well. I think it could be improved a lot with a much tighter crop. And if you imagine cropping out the sky completely so that we have the dog surrounded by a frame of this green and brown foliage, then we have a really pleasing color palette and we're not distracted by that sky that's just taking our eye up to that bright spot up at the top of the picture. Image 14. This is really impactful on first glance. Looking at it a little bit closer, I think that there are some improvements that could bring this up to being a really stellar photograph. So my congratulations to the maker. It's very impactful. It's got a beautiful mood and atmosphere to it. These suggestions are to take it up to that next level. The pose is very symmetrical. However, the framing isn't. So if you have a very symmetrical pose, then really the arms, you can see that camera left, we've got the elbow being cut off at a much closer ratio to the body than the other arm, and the shoulder blades are off center, whereas the bottom, which is the focus of our interest, is center. So if you're going to have a symmetrical pose, a symmetrical image, then make sure that that framing is right. The lighting is very nicely, there is a very nice mood to the lighting. That hand, that camera left hand is just a little bit too bright. The thumb is, all of my attention is going to that thumb. Now, is that where we want the attention to be? I think when you're looking at a figurescape like this, we want to be looking at the planes of the body and not just going directly to that hand. I also think it's a little bit soft, and if I zoom in, I can see that it looks like there's a lot of noise and or grain that's been applied over the top, and the grain has an effect of softening the image overall. That might be the effect you're going for, which is great, but I think it would be a stronger picture if we had a really sharp focus and every detail visible. Moving on to the next image. I really commend the photographer for the composition. This is her beautifully framed. Her eye is right where we want it to be. Some things that I think could really improve the image and make this into an excellent image. The highlight of the makeup in the corner of her eye is so bright that I'm going straight there instead of looking actually in her eye and at her expression. I understand that the makeup has been done that way deliberately, but I think in post-production, you could tone it down a little bit. You always need to remember that the brightest and most contrasty part of the image is where the eye will go to and will keep coming back to. So make sure that you've deliberately chosen where that spot is going to be. I think it would be much more powerful if it was the eye and not the corner of the eye where that makeup is. Another thing that I would love to see refined with this picture is the retouching. Now I can see that once again, just like an earlier image, a skin treatment has been done, I believe using frequency separation with a radius that is too small. Try a much larger radius. If you're at it depends on the size of the image, but my camera, for example, if I were to run a radius of 2, 3, 4, would be way too fine. The texture is so fine that any smoothing that goes on underneath it will make the skin look over retouched, even though we've still got some uneven areas that need to be dealt with. You can see here on the nose, I'm not saying that the skin has to be plastic. On the contrary, I want to see all of the genuine texture of the skin. But by raising the radius to a much higher level for my camera, which is a Sony a7R3, I usually, for a picture this close up, I would be using perhaps a 12 radius. So that's really quite high, but I do that to enable all of the genuine texture of the skin to remain visible while we smooth the tones underneath. So really, if you can really refine that retouching, and we can see down on the shoulder here as well, there's lots of blotchiness that needs to be smoothed out in a natural way, not a plastic way. Image 16, let me zoom out so we can see the frame. Beautiful color toning, very nice shape, triangles created by the leg, by the arm. I would have liked perhaps that hand to be a little bit softer to match the whole softness of the image. It doesn't bother me at all that the backlight is blowing out her hair. I think that adds to the mood of the picture. I would recommend cropping in a little bit tighter on the left so that the image feels a little bit unbalanced, with her legs causing all of the weight to be on one side of the image. I also suspect that we're a little bit soft. If we go in to take a look, yeah, we really need to have razor sharp focus on that face. At least on the eye that's closest to the camera, it needs to be razor sharp. Overall, a lovely mood though. This is a really interesting landscape because usually in a landscape picture, the foreground is warmer and the farthest part of the horizon tends to be cooler and hazier. In this picture, we've got the opposite. We've got a very cold foreground, and then we've got the warm, the evening sun, it looks like, hitting the horizon, the hill, and that house. So that's very interesting, that reversal. I would suggest to the photographer perhaps to position yourself so that we can see more of the boat on an angle rather than just the end of the boat coming straight at us. And I would also, seeing as the boat is nearly on the thirds, I would crop in a little bit and have the boat right on the thirds. I think it would be much more harmonious. Also be careful in post-production that the darks, the shadows aren't blocked up completely. There's a lot of very dark, contrasty areas of rock down in the bottom right of the frame where I can't see any of that detail, any of that shadow detail. And seeing as it's such an important part of the picture, we really need to see it. The same for the horizon. Around the house in the middle there's blocks of areas where there's very little data for us to process. Very beautiful area that's been photographed here in this landscape. Again, we've got this is a more traditional, warmer foreground and a cooler horizon. I feel like there's a little bit too much foreground. The sky is it's a really interesting sky. The water's very interesting. The mountains in the background are very interesting. And I feel that there would have been a more pleasing composition if that horizon line was brought down a little bit lower. That stormy sky is just so moody. What's happening is that the foreground is so warm and has so much going on in it that it's taking us down to look at that foreground. And I feel like the horizon is where the interest really lies. Image 19, this is really a beautifully artistic image. The mood and the atmosphere is fantastic and well done. I really wish the top of the tree and the reflection was visible so that we had a perfect, because the horizon line, sorry, it's not the horizon line, the line of the water is right in the middle. And that means that the tree is right in the middle. So for me, this is a really interesting image. I commend the maker for the mood and the atmosphere that's been captured here. It's absolutely beautiful. This is a beautifully atmospheric picture, and I commend the photographer for capturing such an in-camera artistic image. The color palette is just gorgeous. I love the symmetry of the image. The tree is center. The waterline is in the center of the image. Therefore, I would really have loved to have seen the top of the tree so that it looked like an exact mirror reflection. I'm also curious to see what these, I'm not quite sure what these, it looks like ducks. I wasn't sure if it was some kind of buoy, some kind of net, but I think it's ducks. It's a shame that they're not so visible, but that's what makes the image. Yes, the ducks are great, but we can't see them. In this case, I would therefore retouch them out, as much as it's terrible to retouch out ducks. But because we can't see them and because we have to squint to try and make them out, I think it's disturbing a very artistic picture. Beautifully done. Lovely portrait. I love the cream on cream, the blonde hair with the skin tones, the cream dress. I would suggest a little more control with the lighting. She's standing by a window, I think, and there's another light that's casting that shadow. Her expression is lovely. Looking down, I'm concerned, though, that her laugh, although it's clearly very genuine, which is lovely, it's a beautifully natural expression, but her cheeks are so scrunching her eyes up so much that her eyes are almost closed. That's always a risk when it comes to portraits, because if the eyes are closed or obscured, then we're missing contact. That doesn't mean we always have to be looking at the camera, but the risk of obscuring the eyes in any way needs to be measured up very carefully. One trick I find is to wait until the initial burst of laughter, the initial smile. That's when you get the eyes almost disappearing. And then a split second later, the eyes relax a little bit. And that's when you can take the picture and you still have the natural smile, but the eyes are relaxed a little bit more so that we can see them. The brightest part of the image is down at the bottom on her dress. And that's always something that I try to avoid. Try to focus the light, control the light so that it's falling on the center of interest of the picture, which in this case is the face. I love this picture, and although there are some elements that I would like to comment on that I think can improve it, there are some other things that show that real thought has gone into this. And first of all, the obvious aspect of the storytelling of this lady blowing the dandelion. Clearly time, it's time, the window evokes a clock. there's just a beautiful element of storytelling, and I also love the attention that has been paid to color. We have the yellow complementary to her blouse, and the yellow is picking up the warm tones in her hair and the yellow in the curtains as well. I really, really appreciate this. I do wish that a little bit more care had been taken with the framing. We've got the lamp cut in half. I would have just got rid of that lamp completely, just had the curtains providing this beautiful frame, and a little bit more space, camera left, but behind her back. A little bit more control with the lighting as well, but overall, really beautiful. Well done. A lovely long exposure of the Lyceum Theatre. And yeah, this is, it's always very striking to see a picture like this. We've got the starburst coming from the closed aperture, the very narrow aperture, the lights of the cars, so we can't see the cars, we just see the streaks of light. It always looks really good. I would, to improve this myself, I would pay attention to, we've got a little bit of flare of this little bit of light or some kind of light artifact up here on the camera right. I would have reframed it slightly so that we don't have this bicycle wheel coming into the camera left. These are just what we call refinements. So the extra care in where you position yourself. Also, when it comes to any pictures of buildings, I like to see vertical lines. We have some converging verticals. With a wide angle lens, that can sometimes be a deliberate choice, in which case you are the photographer, you make that choice. I would also retouch out some unnecessary distractions. For example, down here, we have a few little, there's a little red light there. We have some signs that aren't really adding to the picture. I would personally retouch those out in order to make a stronger picture. Wow, this is really impactful. An incredible capture of this acrobat or dancer. I'm really taken by that. I wish that there were fewer distractions. The blue light and the red light, although I understand the storytelling aspect of the theatre being behind this performer. I do really appreciate that. Technically, however, we need a little bit more care with we have this big dark area up in the left hand of the frame. We've got lots of areas falling to total black. This can be controlled with camera settings and the flash used on. So you can freeze the action. You could have a much slower shutter speed, bringing up all of those details. This can also be worked on in RAW, pulling up those details, and have the flash freeze the motion of the performer, which has clearly been done. I would also, if you're going to have the building be such an important part of the frame, take a little bit more care to be square on and have the whole building in the frame, because we've got the edges of the building cut off, the top of the building is cut off, and there's some distortion going on. So either exclude everything and focus solely on the performer, or if you're going to have the building be a really important part of the picture as it is here, then we need to refine that building. This is a very powerful capture of a lion with a very intense gaze, and I love how we've got all of the highlight detail and the shadow detail in the lion himself. I would have liked a slightly wider frame because we're missing part of that incredible mane that the lion has, and I think that would add to the picture. Also, these foreground elements are really disturbing. Now, I know that it's not easy to photograph a lion, and there are going to be elements that hinder you in some way. That means repositioning yourself so that we aren't distracted by the foreground elements. If the foreground elements are there, they need to be placed deliberately, or you need to place yourself deliberately, so that the foreground elements act as a frame and not as an obstruction. The sunlight is hitting them, burning them out, so they're really bright, and I'm looking at that dried grass in the foreground instead of at the powerful gaze of the lion. This is an absolutely fabulous moment that has been captured here. This is just beautiful. A beautiful composition. I would maybe perhaps a little bit tighter on camera left with the frame, but beautifully done. A little bit of care with the light, with the highlights and the shadows. Contrast has been added to the two lions there, quite rightly. That's going to bring our attention right into them. Just be careful. If this is going to print, we want to be able to see all of the detail in the highlights and in the shadows, but just a fantastic composition. The triangle shape formed by the couple here is just lovely. Consider maybe get rid of this little dark blob, which has just caught my eye and taken me away from the action. Really well done. This is a lovely picture of a little girl. This is verging on fine art. This is the look that we're going for. However, we need some refinement to really make this into a superb fine art portrait. Her expression is delicious, so well done with that. The styling for fine art children's portraits is really important. So the knot on her hair needs to have been done with much more care. Her hair needs to be perfect. Styling is just all about, it's part of the storytelling element, and it helps give that historical look. Because if you think about it, if a picture has been painted, so had this been painted by a painter, excuse me, the painter would have deliberately placed every element there. So when you're creating a fine art portrait, every element needs to look as if a painter has painted it deliberately there, not that it's just something that we were able to capture. So that's the look that we need to go for. That doesn't mean going over the top, retouching. It means paying attention to detail. So a little bit of care with that knot on the hair, a little bit of care with the way that the hair is combed. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more 3D dynamics with the lighting. The lighting looks to be a little bit too low and a little bit too central. And that has eliminated, I'm looking at the catch lights, that has eliminated any kind of shadow on the face, which means that we're losing that shape. Again, had this been painted, the painter would have painted in shadows, most probably a Rembrandt triangle of light, so with the light falling, so that we're looking into the shadow part of the face, but with a little triangle of light. So try lifting the light up, placing it higher and in front of the child, so that the light is sort of falling across the front, down and across. Perhaps adding another light to light up the hair. We're losing the top of the head completely into that vignette, and the same for the dark shirt. If this is going to go to print, we really need to see all of the detail in the hair and in the shirt. With the framing, I would like to see either, there are several ways you can go. You could have a traditional portrait frame and have the child central. You could crop in more closely here on the left, so that you're giving her breathing space to the right, so that she's set to on the left third. Or, as a more interesting, might be to have her on the right third, which is against the traditional school, which says that the negative space should always be in front of the face. If you have the negative space behind the child and you crop closer to the face, it introduces an element of tension, because it's not what we're used to seeing. So you can experiment with that. However, make it deliberate, make your choice, and make sure that you know exactly why you're doing it. Another beautiful landscape of a beautiful place. And again, we've got that reversal of the warmth in the horizon and the cooler tones in the foreground. Although it's a beautiful building and it's a beautiful greenery and a beautiful lake, I think that I'm looking at the image, if I crop off everything apart from that warm mountain in the sky and have that as a panorama, I think that would be a much stronger image. Beautiful artistic take on a still life of flowers. If you're going to go for an artistic, it looks textured, there's a painterly feel to it, which is lovely. I would take a little bit more care with the retouching. We've got some dirty spots on the floor here, and this flower is just bent off at a horizontal angle. It would be much nicer if it was going at a diagonal, and we need a little bit more space to the left here of the frame. So, and there's also some desaturation going around the edges of the petals, and I'm not sure if that's the flower or if that's been brushed on. I'm not quite sure. Either way, it's drawing my attention and away from the beauty of the image. So just a few refinements and perhaps a little bit more interesting light. It seems very flat. I think with a little bit more control and directionality of the light and shadow, we could create something really interesting. With this one, we have a much cleaner background and tabletop. And there is exactly the directionality of the light that I was talking about, and it's given a really pleasing feel to the picture. I would love to see this cropped tighter on the left here and more space given to that shadow that's really stretching out. I think that would make this really a strong image. I appreciate how difficult it is to get a fabulous action shot like this. I love the castle in the background. The riders are framed nicely by the greenery. I do think, though, that we need to clean up any distractions that are taking our eyes away from the action. So here we've got this pole that's lying, or the flagpole that's lying down, that's been knocked over. We could clean that up with some retouching. There's some building orange netting here. That's taking away all of my attention from the orange of the riders and on the horses. It's sort of competing for attention. I think we could, with a little bit of cleaning up, we could definitely bring this up. But overall, I love the setting and the incredible action. Again, an incredible action shot. The decisive moment has been captured here beautifully. Fantastic depth of field. The long lens has really helped us to isolate on the picture. Maybe crop in a little bit tighter on the left and have a little bit more space on the right. That gives us the real impression that the horse has somewhere to gallop to. This is an extraordinary composition for such a fast-paced action shot. I'm really impressed with the composition of this. The two polo sticks coming down into that V is quite extraordinary. This is, again, the decisive moment. The two riders leaning into each other, the symmetry of that is really quite incredible. It's a shame about the rider behind kind of distracting with his polo stick, but that's all part of the action. A really great capture. Well done. This is a lovely picture of this boy and a play on the famous image, I think derived originally from Outlander, where there is the hand reaching out and the little boy or the little girl is reaching for their mum or their dad. There are two ways I think we can really improve on this. It's a lovely moment. I think we need to make sure that we're nailing the sharpness. I understand this is a low resolution image, but I can see that the face is not quite sharp. So make sure you've mastered your camera and how to capture motion. So you need to be on continuous motion. In Canon, I think they call it single servo, I think, where you have a single focus spot. you put it on continuous mode so that the camera can track a moving subject, can track someone coming towards you, so that you hold down your focus as the person is moving and you're able to capture that motion. Now, if we could just eliminate the skyline completely and the tree and just have that green with the complementary red, fantastic color scheme. But if we could crop that out, just crop out everything and have a different perspective so that the arm is set against the green, that would be a really, really powerful picture. So try this again, doing that, just eliminating the sky completely. I would also suggest putting the red child on the third, either bang central with a very symmetrical composition or on the third. You can't go wrong with being on the third. Oh, this is just such a great, I recognize this face. I think we've all seen this face, those of us who have children, and even those of us who don't have children. We've made this face ourselves over the past year. This is a great moment that has been captured. And I think that we could strengthen it by turning it to black and white, perhaps burning down this bright window in the background, and the black and white would eliminate this color, the pink and the yellow, that's taking all of our attention away from the expression on the child's face, which is where all of the impact of the image and the joy of the image is. Image 35. Oh, this is really striking, and I'm really excited about it because I have some things that I think could turn this into a great image. We need a little bit more care with the lines. So the lines of the door and the hinge are tilted, but with the tip that I'm going to give you, that's not going to be an issue. The hinge of the door, that line, that dark line, is going right through the shadow of the figure that has been captured. The arm in the foreground is wonderful. The shape of the body is wonderful. I wish we could see the hand, the shadow of the hand. This can be done. You need to position the dancer. You need to have the light coming in at the right time of the day. You need to position yourself so that we get the full figure, the full arms. And if we could do it on a blank wall so that we don't have these lines interrupting, or close the door so that at least we don't have that dark hinge. But fantastic, well done. Also eliminate this, I'm not sure if it's the arm of a chair down here in camera right, but really well done, very striking. Another beautifully tender moment between mother and child. This is another picture where we could really improve things by paying some attention to details. Now look at the background. If we could just pull that curtain closed, we could eliminate this bright window that is pulling my eye away from the child at the mother's breast and distracting me, and it's not adding anything to the picture. You could also crop it out, crop in tighter. This is another one where I think black and white would work really well. Anything where there is a great emotion or impact, emotional impact, expression, connection between the subjects tends to work well in black and white because we're no longer distracted by the color. However, the color tones are very, very pleasing because this pale blue is a beautiful complementary to the skin tones. Lovely moment. With regards to retouching in post-production, maybe a little less clarity. I think perhaps some clarity has been added in post-production, and I think maybe it's a little bit too much for a child. And our final picture, this is really moody and atmospheric, and it looks like a long exposure. We can see a figure moving there in the background, and it's the long exposure that has given us this wonderful mood. I think we could improve on the composition by eliminating a lot of what's in the left part of the frame, because the path is really where our eyes are being drawn down, and it's right over on the edge of the frame. This dark tree is pulling all of our attention. So if we could have had that further over to the left, had the pathway on the third, that would have drawn us down and in. I would also take care with these bright patches in the background. That's really distracting us. It's pulling me away from the path, and the path is where we want to go. That is the end. We have reached the end of all of the pictures. I hope you found that interesting. As I said, if you would like to object or ask for more information or just continue the conversation, please do so. I'd be happy to respond.